Hello and welcome to another webinar at 9.arts. This is art as a tool for placemaking, 5 tips for developers. So whether you're a developer, interested in placemaking, or just curious about art within the built environment, you've found yourself in the right place. I'm your host, Keith Hitchcock, Digital Content Manager at 9.arts, and I want to introduce Olivia Dahlquist. She is our special guest today. She is a content marketing manager at 9.arts and a creative placemaking aficionado who's familiar with all things 9.arts. Hello, Olivia.
Hi, Keith. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to talk to you today.
We also have a moderator in the wings, Christelle, who's going to be helping toss some useful, hopefully, information and answering any questions behind the scenes that might be coming up. Here is what we are talking about today. Talking about a lot of things. These are the primary takeaways that we hope you'll walk away with. Some key placemaking principles, along with how art brings your project vision to life, some financial benefits of early art integration, building goodwill through authentic community engagement. And it's all about how arts infused spaces can make both a social and financial impact. So in a moment, we'll dive into just a few words about us, 9.arts, and then we'll get into the main content, all about art and placemaking. You'll get those 5 tips along the way, and we will have time for Q&A at the end. So whenever you want to toss a question at us, feel free to do so. Just tap on that question Q&A icon at the bottom center of your Zoom window. And yeah, well, like I say, we'll have dedicated time for Q&A at the end. We'll get to as many questions as we can. And so, you don't have to take copious notes if you don't want to. We will be sending you a follow-up email that has a video recording of what you're watching today. So you can refer to that or rewatch if you like at that point. So let's dive into just learning a little bit more about who we are, 9.arts. Olivia, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. So 9.arts is a national art consulting, curating, and creative placemaking firm that helps both public and private sector clients create one-of-a-kind spaces that captivate their audiences and really distinguish a unique sense of place. And we do this by curating art from primarily local, underrepresented, and emerging artists. So we have a team of specialists that work nationwide, but with specific presence in Denver, Seattle, and Atlanta. And our projects span a range of industries from boutique hotels to 20,000-acre community art plans, which are traditionally known as art master plans. So far, we've completed nearly 1,000 projects across 36 states and 5 countries, which has allowed us to generate more than 40 million for the creative economy since our inception in 2009. So we're pretty proud of that number, and it's only growing. Additionally, we have this proprietary artist database called Dotfolio, and you can see it there, dotfolioart.com. And this has over 100,000 artworks for our curatorial team to search when they're curating artwork for a project. So if you're an artist listening in today, please make sure you check out Dotfolio because you can create a free portfolio, upload your artwork for us to see, and also get access to several free resources, opportunities, and events to kind of help you boost your personal art business. But in terms of working with clients, overall, 9.arts can really be considered a partner in placemaking. So we work with everyone from developers, designers, and architects to, of course, artists, community leaders, city planners, and others to create these very kind of hyper-local art experiences that transform spaces into the kinds of destinations that we all want to spend time in. So I'm excited to share more about some of those places with you today.
All right, one other note as before Olivia dives into the main content, I just wanted to call out the State of the Art Report, which is a publication, a report that we commissioned just last year and surveyed business leaders across many industries. It's all about how art impacts the projects in the built environment. Full of info. We actually included a few stats from that report, so I wanted to call it out for that reason. Christelle may have a link to that if you want to explore that further. It is just so full of information. On a related note, I want to mention that we have an ebook coming out very soon that covers a lot of the same material and goes even deeper. All about placemaking. It's called The Art of Placemaking, the ultimate guide for leveraging art and culture in pursuit of one-of-a-kind destinations. We're super proud of this ebook, and it will be coming out soon. So watch for that. With that, I think I want to hand it back to Olivia to dive into the heart of the content today.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. Well, before I really dig in, I want to say that if you enjoy what you hear today and you learn something new, I would love to encourage you to stay tuned for part 2 of this webinar, which will feature our CEO and co-founder, Martha Weidman. And she's going to be talking even more about placemaking, specifically as it relates to community art planning or art master planning. So that webinar is going to be coming up in November, and you will receive some information about it. So please stay tuned. Now let's dig in. So what is placemaking, right? We know that it has become such a buzzword in the real estate community, especially as folks are working to differentiate their properties from the competition. But at 9.Arts, we like to think of placemaking not so much as a result, but as a people-centered process that involves the planning, design, and management of public spaces. And that could be anywhere from streets and parks to buildings, transportation hubs, and all other kinds of spaces that are often connected to one another, especially given the rise in mixed use environments and this trend toward very interconnected live, work, shop, play destinations. So even if you're not a mixed use developer, say you work on hotels or corporate offices, everything that we share today, it will be relevant to you because it's all about really transforming your space through the power of art and culture. And that is creative placemaking, right? So creative placemaking is all about infusing art and culture into the placemaking process while meaningfully engaging the people who live in that space in the decision-making and development. So for us, that really means engaging artists. And I just kind of wanted to ground today's conversation in these definitions because we acknowledge that placemaking is a very nuanced process that can involve several players, but today we're really focused on the role of art in placemaking and how it can help developers create these distinct quality spaces where people want to spend their time and that make both a social and financial impact. So let's take a look at some of that impact. Why does art matter, right? Why do we want to have art in the built environment? Well, on the financial side, an art experience can elicit everything from increasing foot traffic within your space to earning you media recognition, brand recognition, and overall a competitive advantage. While on the social side, if your art program has been, curated thoughtfully and incorporates local artists, it's going to garner that public investment and goodwill, meanwhile helping you uplift the creative economy. So really, when done well, we believe that artwork can be a win-win for developers, their intended audience, and for society at large. And here I just wanted to show an example of what I'm talking about. So on the left, you've got this gray, stark space that just isn't going to do much in terms of attracting folks into your building. Whereas on the right, you see this fantastic, vibrant mural that's made by a local artist from Oceanside, California, where this project is located. And it's reflecting themes that are popular to that community, like the jellyfish, the surfboard. So with this mural as the backdrop, people are going to want to hang out at that patio space. Maybe they want to go inside, get a coffee, and even rent some gear from the hotel to go out and enjoy those kinds of sun and surf activities. And overall, people want to hang out there because they feel good there. And when people feel good in your space, they remember your space. They want to stay there longer, tell their friends, and come back again. And this allows you to command higher rates, have longer bookings, and overall see an increase in revenue because the artwork is working for you. So now we can talk about how to reap some of those benefits through 5 essential placemaking tips. The first one is to solidify your art vision. And this is a critical first step because we cannot build these one-of-a-kind destinations if we don't know where we're headed. So vision development can be a very collaborative and creative process that's really all about envisioning the property long-term through the lens of art and culture. It involves asking questions like, what will the space look and feel like? Who's going to spend time there and what emotions will it evoke? And then, of course, how will art and culture play a role? One way to determine the answers to some of these questions is through an interactive discovery session. And at 9.Arts, we call this our visual preference survey. So this happens when all kinds of stakeholders, whether developer, designer, even community members, come together to review and respond to various art types, concepts, styles, mediums. And from these visioning sessions, together we can kind of understand the utility, character, and meaning of a place, and also establish those goals and criteria that are going to guide the kind of art and cultural programming that will make a vision come to life. So this sort of artistic vision development is important for any kind of space, right? But especially those mixed use environments where the artwork might be serving as those critical connection points between something like a park, a plaza, retail shops, etc. So here I just wanted to show an example of how the early art vision can really impact the final outcome of the project. So we've got 3 different properties here. On the left, you see the Catbird Hotel in Denver. And early on, the client told us, we want something funky and eccentric that's going to make people say, what's that, at every corner. And of course, we've got this very kind of fun, colorful chair sculpture that's on the roof that's doing just that. You walk up onto the roof and you say, a chair sculpture, like it automatically sets the vibe for the kind of experience that you're going to have when you're hanging out on the roof and having a drink. Whereas in the middle, you've got the Ritz-Carlton, completely different brand focused on sophistication and elegance. And so we have a stone sculpture in the lobby to sort of reflect those qualities. Whereas the Perry Lane Hotel was all about this idiosyncratic vibe. They wanted it to be eclectic, vintage, and worldly, and kind of reminiscent of that old Savannah charm, which it definitely achieved. So I just wanted to show these to demonstrate how establishing that vision early on can totally shape the direction and success of the space. Establishing the art vision early also allows you to take on tip number 2, which is to integrate artwork early. So whether it's a mixed use development that's going to come to life in the next year or so, or more of a large scale development that'll, be developed over the next decade, thinking about art and budgeting for art early in the project lifecycle can create several benefits down the road. And what's interesting is that in that state of the art report, we actually asked folks about early art integration, and only 18% of developers said that they think about art in the project's initial vision, while just 55% said that they don't decide their art budget until after the construction and design budgets have been selected. So we've just found that, waiting in this way and creating these delays can actually diminish the overall impact of the art experience and leave the space feeling rather lackluster or dull. And honestly, when this happens, people do notice. So at 9.Arts, we recommend bringing us in at about 60% of schematic design completion. And this means that there's a rough layout that depicts basic construction elements so that we kind of have a foundation to start selecting the major art locations. At this point, we can also prioritize any necessary engineering or structural support that may be needed to support those artworks, as well as integrate the artwork with lighting, architecture, and design, even things like plumbing, to make sure that the whole property just feels cohesive. So this, of course, streamlines communication, planning, and workflow across your project teams. But beyond that, such thoughtfulness in the early stages of the project, that's what creates the space for those bold, iconic, wow art moments that would be impossible anywhere else, and that frankly keep people coming back to your space. So one great example of early vision development and art integration is the Exchange at Boulevard 1, which is a 1.5 block mixed use redevelopment featuring retail, restaurant, office, and entertainment areas. So we kind of like to think about it as an upscale mall, a mall that you actually want to go to and spend time in. So our team worked with Confluent Development to do that early visual preference survey, which helped us discover that they wanted very friendly, multi-generational artwork placed very strategically to form connections among these spaces. And so because they brought us in early, we were able to curate an art program that did just that while also covering up some eyesores. So in the bottom left, you see this bluish mural by Leo Bumbakini, and that actually covers up a utility storage that was placed right in the middle of the parking lot where everyone drives up. Whereas on the top right, you see this colorful wraparound mural by a group called Magic Studios, and that's actually covering the parking garage. So just creating a total moment of delight and engagement as soon as you get into the parking lot and go up toward the property. And then below on the bottom right, you've got this installation by Airworks Studio, which is inside sort of a passageway and reflects different colored lights off of the walls, again, creating this very dynamic and engaging experience that beckons you down that walkway. So altogether, these artworks were used to cover traditionally just gray spaces that would have otherwise taken away from the appeal of the property. Another benefit of bringing us in early for this project was that it actually required funding from the Denver Urban Renewal Authority, which required that a certain percent of the project budget had to be dedicated to public art. And this kind of public financing or percent for art requirement really needs early integration to understand how those funds are going to be allocated and to ensure that they meet city standards. So when we were brought in early, we were able to oversee this process and kind of give the developers a sense of just what the artwork could do for the development, which prompted them to actually allocate even more money toward the art program once they saw what an impact it could make. So now this program features mostly local and underrepresented artists, again, because our team had the time to really do that deep research and put an emphasis on artist identity to align with the values of the developer and the local community. Funny enough, there were also some lessons learned in this project. You can see that in the center image there, you've got a really colorful mural by Curie Lee Jones that actually wraps around and spans 4 walls. And it's just such an iconic sense of place that it creates. And it can be seen from even streets away. So sort of a landmark moment for the property. But it turns out that prior to bringing us in, the developer had actually already painted this wall. So, had we had conversations about the mural first, we could have potentially saved them some time and money since we ended up sort of transforming it with the mural application. So overall, the project is just a great example of both the downsides of waiting to integrate art, as with this mural, and the tremendous upsides of early visioning and art integration, which in this case has transformed Boulevard One from an urban mall setting to kind of this engaging mixed use live, work, shop, and play environment. And now for the third placemaking principle, which is to leverage creative collaborations. So this means really thinking beyond your typical project team of developers, designers, and architects to instead incorporate people like artists, art consultants, cultural leaders, and others. And from our experience, these are the kind of placemaking professionals that are going to help distinguish your development in authentic and, most importantly, enduring ways. So these folks can offer new perspectives, give you connections to locals, and hold you accountable to ensure that the placemaking process doesn't happen in a silo. So for example, a community leader might be able to direct construction efforts away from a sacred space, while an artist could help honor that space through a very thoughtful installation that kind of reflects those shared community values. And overall, we have just found that these kinds of creative collaborations among diverse groups can lead to more creative solutions, authentic projects, and overall differentiation from the cookie cutter developments down the block. Building on this, tip number 4 is to connect to the community. For 9.Arts, this is really a non-negotiable in the creative placemaking process. We believe that locals know their city best. So rather than coming in as outsiders and kind of making assumptions about what the place needs or wants, we believe in actually engaging the residents who live there in the decision-making that's going to take place about how they're going to experience their community once this new thing is built, right? So rather than focusing on deficits, we want to think about leveraging local strengths, talent, and knowledge. What is the place known for? What are the local industries? Who are the community leaders that could help us kind of gain some buy-in? And then, of course, what's going on in the local art scene that we can tap into? And altogether, this just makes for stronger storytelling and a more meaningful project that, again, is going to distinguish you from that cookie cutter space down the block that feels kind of out of touch and out of character with the surrounding community. And we all know those buildings that I'm talking about. So we really believe that when community connections to community happen with sincerity and are not just transactional, this can actually garner true public investment. And when the public is invested, that sparks further buy-in from nearby businesses, local policymakers, and suddenly you've got these ripple effects beyond just what's going on in the built environment. So I want to share an example of that, which is Midtown Square. So this is a newer mixed-use development in Seattle's Central District, which is a historically redlined neighborhood with very rich African-American history, where many Black creatives have unfortunately been displaced due to rapid urban development and gentrification. So this project is a great example of creative collaborations and connections to community because it involved partnerships among our team, the local developer Lake Union Partners, city planners such as Rico Kirandongo of the Seattle's Office of Planning and Community Development, as well as artists, philanthropists, and very importantly, activist and community leader Vivian Phillips. And among all these partnerships, we were able to transform what was originally supposed to be high-rise apartments into this vibrant mixed-use public plaza featuring a mix of both market rate and affordable housing, as well as permanent retail space for minority-owned businesses like Art Noir, which is a nonprofit dedicated to uplifting Black art, artists, and culture. And then, of course, as you can see in these images, we're also able to create this vibrant public art program featuring people and motifs that really reflect the truth and history of the Black culture in that area, meanwhile creating synergies among the apartments, the public space, the retail areas, etc. So if you're interested in learning more about this project, definitely head to our website. You can find several podcasts with some of the partners that I mentioned. And these are just really engaging and do such a great job of telling the story behind Midtown Square. But overall, I love this example because it proves that placemaking is about so much more than creating a pretty place. Really, it's about thinking collectively and creatively about how to use real estate in innovative ways that actually give back to the people who live there and that are truly designed for the people. And that brings me to my last point, which is to elevate the human experience. So, anyone who's in community building or commercial real estate, we do this kind of thing because we want to create great places that benefit the people who use them. And that's really what human-centered design is all about. So when we leverage art to design with people in mind, we can actually influence the kind of behaviors that we want to see in a space. And the examples are honestly endless. Think about something like a large-scale mural that's placed outside a building that can be seen maybe from streets away and helps people sort of navigate to that space while sparking conversation, or a sculptural fountain that's in the center of a public plaza, which promotes play and community gathering, and maybe encourages people to take a stroll where they stumble upon a life-size sculpture that signifies a cultural landmark and kind of tells the history of that site. And maybe that sculpture is situated in a public square where performances and protests and civic engagements of all kinds are taking place. So in this way, you can see that art is kind of the catalyst for human connection, and it creates those synergies among people and place that really influences our experience when we visit somewhere new. So a great example of leveraging art to influence human behavior is Denver's famous Dairy Block Alley. This is the site of the original Windsor Dairy, excuse me. So the artwork there not only honors this legacy through themes of craftsmanship and nods to makers and artists of all kinds, but it's also placed very strategically to kind of beckon people into the area and encourage them to spend time and money. So on the bottom right there, you can see the 30-foot tall spilt milk sculpture, which is kind of a landmark installation that welcomes people into the alley. And as you move through the alley, you have these vibrant murals lining the alleyway, complemented by light installations on the ground, musical churns along the walls, and even this sort of reflective mural installation on the ceiling. And when you wander far enough in, suddenly you are just immersed in this buzzing and lively environment where the retail, entertainment, and public spaces are all coming together in a really magical way. So maybe you stop and take an Instagram selfie next to a mural, and that prompts you to see the nearby retail shop where you go on inside and suddenly you're in the hotel standing under the 500-pound wooden hand hanging from the ceiling of the Maven Hotel lobby. So you text your friend and say, meet me under the hand, right? And then you're grabbing dinner at the restaurant next door where this awesome iconic mural is kind of the backdrop while you're eating. And so in all these ways, artwork has influenced every moment of the visitor experience at the Dairy Block. And despite being a concentrated space, the artwork has kind of enticed people in and then slowed them down. And when people are moving more slowly, you can actually have more density. And when you have more density, you can charge higher rates in a smaller space. So really, Dairy Block is just an exceptional example of the way that artwork can totally influence human behavior and create something that's one of a kind and that's going to keep people coming back. So just to reiterate, we've gone through 5 essential placemaking tips that prove that art is such a powerful placemaking tool. You want to solidify your art vision and integrate art early. You want to leverage creative collaborations and connections to the community. And then, of course, you want to elevate the human experience through art and culture. And I want to just end by sharing this Urban Land Institute quote, which says that creative placemaking or leveraging art and culture in tandem with great design is a proven accelerator for real estate development projects. So again, if you can really follow these tips and integrate art in authentic and intentional ways, you're going to reap some amazing social and financial benefits. And so, with that, I want to close and say thank you so much for joining today. If you feel like you've learned something new, something valuable, as Keith mentioned, we do have this ebook coming out that's going to be diving even deeper into some of the placemaking principles I shared today. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we've got part 2 of this webinar coming up with our CEO, Martha Weidman, who's going to be digging even deeper into the creative placemaking process and its role in sort of macro level solutions like workforce development and innovation to improve public safety and civic pride. So please stay tuned for more details. And with that, I think I'll pass it back to Keith.
Awesome. Well, that was a great crash course in how art relates to placemaking, creative placemaking. And I'm sure that there are a lot of questions that are bubbling up. So if you have a question, feel free to open up that little question panel. It's that Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom panel. And we'll get to as many questions as we can with the time we have. And it's just so rich with information, Olivia. I really appreciate that. So we do have some questions coming in. So we'll just start doing them. Olivia, if you're ready.
Sounds good.
All right, because we're tossing it back to you now with question number 1, which is, how do you address a public art requirement?
Yeah, great question. So let's start with what is a public art requirement. This is when cities will often require at least 1% of the project budget to be dedicated to public facing artwork. So we've seen this in several recent projects in Seattle, San Francisco, Aurora, and many other places. And so in this case, our team will kind of work with the client to establish the overall art budget and focus specifically on which art locations are going to meet that public art requirement, especially because anything funded under a public art requirement has to be visible and accessible to the public. So that's really our expertise, is coming in to identify those high traffic art locations that are going to make the greatest impact. Then we'll kind of work with the client to build a consensus toward the direction of the public art pieces. And this involves kind of helping to facilitate decision-making among the client and other stakeholders. Oftentimes there are public art commissions or art committees that have stakes in this process. So we will present the possible art selections to them, get that buy-in, and then again help facilitate decision making while navigating this sort of bureaucratic process of ensuring is the selected artwork going to meet all the public art requirements, and meet the criteria necessary to fulfill use of those funds. So really our team takes care of managing that whole process to kind of give our clients peace of mind so that they can focus on other responsibilities.
Great. Thanks for that question. Moving on to the next one, which is, how early would you want to begin thinking about art or bring in an art consultant?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we like to be brought in at about 60% of schematic design completion. And that means that there's enough of a construction layout to give us the foundation to kind of establish those high impact art locations. And when we can do this in collaboration with the other stakeholders, like the designer, the architect, and the developer, that can kind of inform the progression of the property and ensure that everything is moving forward together. So not only does this kind of streamline communication, but it can prevent those expensive, often time-consuming change orders down the road, some of which sometimes require rush fees, depending what point you're at in the project. So really starting early saves you time and money. And not only that, it can actually make you money because you've planned in advance for those high impact revenue boosting art moments that are what get people through the door and make them want to come back.
Great. All right, keep those questions coming in. We have another one here, which is, how do you preserve the community culture when you work in a new area?
Yeah, this is a great question and one we get a lot. We recognize that urban development is accelerating across several areas, and this can, of course, cause concern for locals who are hesitant about change or really just want the best for their cities. So if we're working on a new project, we hold ourselves accountable to understand and represent those local interests. And that means that instead of coming in as outsiders and saying, here's what this place needs, we try to take more of a strengths-based approach, and we do that through a creative lens. So we want to recognize all the assets that are already existing in that space and think about how can we further develop and amplify those assets through art and culture. So beyond kind of surveying the community members and being involved in early discussions about community values and the history of the space that they want to preserve, we'll also immerse ourselves in the local artist community through deep and very intentional research. So this might involve going to local artist co-ops and collectives, attending university MFA shows, even doing, that online Instagram research, really whatever we need to do to become connected to the local creative networks and find the folks who know their communities best and who can honor them through artwork. Then we'll, of course, work with the client to commission these folks to create really thoughtful pieces that reflect the community culture and pay tribute to the history of that space. So again, we see this as kind of a responsibility to not only ourselves, but to the client to help prevent them from creating another cookie cutter development. And then, of course, to the local residents and creatives who have so much to offer when it comes to honoring their homes and bringing that depth and richness to a space.
Great. Really well said, Olivia. And, we geared this webinar toward developers, but we likely have some artists watching today. And I think this is probably from one of them. So welcome. Glad you joined us. It is, how do you find the right artist for a project?
Yeah, great question. So, all of our projects start with understanding the client's overall brand vision and goals, as well as the particular art vision, including, the aesthetics, the location, and other kinds of criteria. So once we know that, we will do that kind of deep research I was mentioning and engage with the local community to understand local culture and source artists who reflect it and who also reflect our client's brand vision. And because Nine Dot Arts really focuses on curating art from local, underrepresented, and emerging artists, this means that we definitely have to know the markets that we're working in and understand sort of whose artwork is already kind of saturating those areas and who could be a newer up and coming artist that might make a great impact in that space. So this is where our curators are really experts. They have a plethora of artist relationships, as well as they can tap into our database Dotfolio, which allows us to search by location so that we can find artists who are local to that project site. But really, we work on a project by project basis, meaning that we purchase the artwork that's going to match our client's brand vision. And sometimes we can find a fit right away, while other times it can take months and even years to find the right project for an artist's work. So if you are an artist listening today, please know that we value you so much, and please don't get discouraged if we haven't been able to work together yet, because it doesn't mean that we aren't trying or that we don't like what we see. Sometimes it just takes that time to find the best client-artist collaboration.
Great. Well said again. Next question is, you've shown a lot of visual art today. Do you do other kinds of art programming?
Yes, we do. So I briefly touched on in the opening sort of our two other lines of business. One is community art planning, which is traditionally known as art master planning. And in this process, we work with municipalities, cities, and really large scale developers to think about how to embed art and culture into the fabric of a place long before they're ever created, right? So oftentimes we'll be creating these CAP plans, we call them, 10, 20, 30 years before anything is going to be built, to help think about, how art and culture might inform that space and inform the generations that are going to live there. Additionally, we have this other line of business that we call our art activations. And these can be done as a project is in development or soon after it opens, to kind of mark the opening and get people excited, entice them into the space. So we've done everything from kind of groundbreaking ceremonies where we invite artists who are featured in the collection to come and speak, to art tours led by our curators, artist workshops, honestly, all kinds of community events that are designed specifically to amplify the art collection and to build goodwill and good press for the property.
Great. All right, looks like we have a few more questions here. If you haven't dropped your question in there yet, feel free to do that. Next one is, what experience do you have with corporate office projects?
Yeah, we've got quite a bit of experience with corporate office projects. As I mentioned earlier, we work across a range of verticals. So that includes corporate office, hotels, multifamily properties, public space, hospitals, really, you name it, we're here to help you create an art experience. Today, I mentioned a lot of mixed use developments because we're really noticing that nothing is happening in a silo. Oftentimes, these various spaces are converging under the umbrella of mixed use. So they might have some office space plus some retail, coffee shop, public space, etc. So really, our process for art curation and installation that I've talked about today, it remains the same across verticals. And of course, there are certain universals that we follow, such as placing art in high traffic areas and amenity rich areas. But of course, we tailor our art experiences to that industry and to the client's vision. So for example, in an office, you might have more abstract artwork that's going to stimulate creativity and collaboration, whereas in a space like a senior living community, you'll probably have more familiar artworks that are prompting reflection or memory care or wayfinding. So it's all about kind of working with our partners to understand their initial vision and then get creative about how to bring that to life and create something memorable for the intended audience.
Great. A couple more questions here. Apart from art curation, who manages the rest of the process, installation, etc.? The developer, Nine Dot Arts?
Yeah, good question. Well, we have a team of over 30 people, and these folks work nationwide with very specialized expertise in everything from art consulting and curation, like I've talked about today, to very skillful purchasing, negotiation, and acquisition of the artwork, as well as some of that community engagement and cultural planning, and even things like your general, project management, which is actually really hard and intense work, and strategic budget recommendations or marketing of the art collection. So there's all kinds of things that go into it, and unlike some art vendors or sole proprietors, we have this diverse team of experts that can manage the entire process from the earliest stages of vision development to the final installation or any ongoing art activations, and really everything in between. So our whole process is really to give our clients peace of mind and allow us to do the heavy lifting. Additionally, we do sometimes work with vendors. We've got several relationships with really high quality art vendors across the country. So if we have a special framing order or some kind of special installation requirements, our team can manage those partnerships, oversee contracts with the vendors, and again, just kind of ensure this seamless process for the client.
Great. All right, I think we'll do one more. This is a good one to end on. And if we didn't get to your question, we'll do our best to follow up with you with an answer. But let's end with this one, Olivia. It's what's one of your favorite art experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question and a difficult one. Well, my family, we love Van Gogh, and we actually took the opportunity to go to Amsterdam a few years ago and go to the Van Gogh Museum. So that was a really special experience to do as a family. But beyond that, and kind of in another lane, I'm a huge Earth, Wind, and Fire fan, and I've now had the chance to go to 2 Earth, Wind, and Fire concerts. And how can you not dance when you're listening to Earth, Wind, and Fire? And we're about to be at the 21st night of September, so I thought that would be a good thing to mention.
Oh man, you've been to 2 more Earth, Wind, and Fire concerts than I have. So that
Yeah,
is that
gotta
is so
get to
cool.
one.
That was great, Olivia. And as we start to close things up, I want to suggest a couple next steps for folks wanting to continue exploring placemaking. One is the webinar that Olivia has mentioned coming up in the weeks to come with featuring our CEO, Martha Weidman, just going even deeper with placemaking and leaning into aspects of community art planning, traditionally known as master art planning. There's also the ebook that I mentioned previously, which is coming out soon, The Art of Placemaking, the ultimate guide for leveraging art and culture in pursuit of one-of-a-kind destinations. We're really proud of this. It's going to be a great ebook, so watch for that coming soon. If you're not on our our mailing list, be sure you are. You're probably on our list now if you're watching this webinar. If you want to continue the conversation with about a specific project, don't hesitate to get in touch. Let's talk at 9.arts.com. I want to thank Olivia for coming in and giving us this really rich, info-rich, visually rich presentation. So thank you, Olivia.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Whether you're watching live or whether you're watching the recording of this, thanks for giving a watch. And always more info via blogs, via podcasts, ebooks, etc. You can find that via our website. So keep in touch and find us on social media as well. Thanks again for joining, and hope to see you again. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.